following ring camera footage was recorded outside an apartment complex in the Oak Cliff area of Dallas, Texas. On a Saturday evening in August 2023, at around 6 p.m., a ring alert popped up on a tenant's phone. That tenant was a man named Ethan Rodriguez. When he checked the live feed, he saw a man he didn't recognize standing at his front door, knocking and claiming to be there for maintenance. This man said he was from the apartment's maintenance team, and kept repeating that he needed to check the air filters. But from the very beginning, his behavior did not match that story at all. He wasn't wearing a proper uniform, kept shifting his weight and pacing in front of the door, constantly glanced over his shoulder, and even seemed to signal to someone just out of frame at times. Inside the unit, Ethan was there with his family, and he already knew what the real maintenance staff looked like, so it immediately seemed very suspicious that someone would show up unannounced on a Saturday evening to check air filters, without any prior notice from the leasing office. Sensing something was off, he chose not to open the door or even respond at first, quietly watching through the ring feed as the stranger lingered outside, refusing to leave and repeating the same line about the air filter, despite never getting a single reply. As the man hovered in front of the door instead of moving on to other units like a real maintenance worker would, his presence became almost impossible to ignore, and Ethan's concern and paranoia grew with every passing second. Finally, he decided he had to say something, but he still wasn't about to unlock that door, so he spoke up through his ring camera, confronting the fake maintenance worker from behind the safety of the closed door.
Apartment 8276. This is 8277.
Can I help you?
Oh yes, they came to check your air filters. I'm not sure. This is 8277.
Apartment. No one came to air filters.
Can you repeat that?
No one came to check the air apartment.
No. Yeah, we're checking the air filters.
Oh, nobody's home right now. You'll have to wait till another day.
Oh, much appreciated. 872.
After Ethan spoke through the ring and told the man that nobody was home, he did it with his family still inside the apartment, intentionally lying in a last-ditch effort to keep the suspicious stranger away from the door. He already knew this wasn't a real maintenance worker, and opening up was never an option. For a brief moment it actually seemed to work. The man stepped away from the door and moved down the walkway toward another unit, acting like he had finally given up and was moving on. But once he seemed convinced that Ethan's apartment was empty, he came back with another assailant, and the two of them began viciously kicking at Ethan's door, hammering their weight into it over and over as they tried to force their way inside. After Ethan saw the men kicking at his door, he grabbed his gun and fired multiple rounds straight through it, doing exactly what he felt he had to do to drive the attackers back and protect everyone inside. In response, one of the men, who was also armed, fired back twice before he and the other suspect finally turned and ran from the doorway. Despite all those shots, neither Ethan nor any of the individuals outside were hit or seriously injured. In the chaotic aftermath, both Ethan and nearby neighbors who heard the gunfire called 911, and moments later, Dallas police officers arrived on scene, finding shell casings in the hallway and bullet holes through the front door, before clearing the area and making contact with Ethan inside the apartment.
Dallas police!
Yeah.
Mr. Rodriguez, Ethan, it's Dallas police!
Hey, they shot back. There's shell casings out here.
Right here, open the door.
Yeah, just open the door slowly, man. Make sure I can see your hands. Hey,
We're all in
your
here.
hands.
We're all in your
Both hands.
hands.
Alright, come on out, man.
Are you the only one inside?
No, my brother.
Alright, I want all of you guys to come out. Just step over here from me.
Come on, Dustin.
Alright, man.
Can I get my phone? Can I show you a video?
Yeah, we'll get it.
Be on the
You
camera.
guys hear this? You guys, can I go inside?
Go ahead.
All this stuff? Okay.
Yeah, I do. I gotta do. I'm spaz hard as fuck right now.
How's one over here? 401.
Dallas police.
Before any of this happened?
We're gonna need to see it.
You guys have
After the police arrived at Ethan's door, both he and his brother were briefly detained and brought outside at gunpoint while officers tried to figure out what had just happened. But once they reviewed the ring footage and heard Ethan's side of the story, he was treated as a victim rather than a suspect, and was not charged for shooting through the door, with investigators viewing his actions as self-defense against an armed break-in. In the days that followed, detectives used the video and tips to track down one of the men seen at Ethan's door. He was identified as 30-year-old Aaron Contreras, who police say was one of the suspects posing as maintenance right before the attempted forced entry. Contreras was ultimately arrested and charged with aggravated assault, deadly conduct, and attempted burglary of a habitation. The second man, the one wearing red in the footage, has never been publicly identified or arrested and is still believed to be at large. In conclusion to this attempted break-in, when detectives processed the scene outside the apartment, they found shell casings scattered in the hallway and a front door riddled with bullet holes. Dallas police later said Ethan fired 13 rounds through the door, while the suspects fired back twice. Yet somehow, despite the number of bullets tearing through that narrow hallway, no one was hit, which is the only reason this story didn't end in a tragic scene over a fake maintenance visit. The following footage was originally posted to Reddit with the chilling title, "Violent Man Caught on My Ring Camera," shared by a user going by Danielle Cohn Harvard. On the afternoon of June 7th, Danielle, who lived in an apartment complex in Orlando, Florida, noticed her phone light up with a ring alert. Someone was at her front door while she was home alone. When she opened the live view, she didn't see a delivery driver or a neighbor. Instead, she saw a man with a knife she didn't recognize, standing right outside her unit, pacing back and forth, muttering and working himself up just inches from the door, his voice low but growing angrier. As the footage continued, the man stepped fully into view at her apartment door, his body tense and confrontational, and he began jabbing at the Ring doorbell as if he were trying to stab the camera lens itself, with only a thin layer of wood and that tiny camera separating him from Danielle inside. The individual aggressively kept jabbing at the camera like he wanted to stab his way through it, clearly furious at someone on the other side of that door, even though Danielle had never seen him before in her life. Whether he had been intoxicated, mentally unstable, or targeting the wrong apartment was anyone's guess. But one thing was certain, his behavior was unpredictable enough that any knock or even a simple response could have escalated this situation into something much worse. In Danielle's Reddit post, she explained that this stranger had been caught on her Ring camera right outside her door at Rexford at Waterford Lakes at around 5:17 p.m., and that the encounter disturbed her enough that she went ahead and filed a police report. However, that did almost nothing to actually help her. According to Danielle, the only real advice she got was basically just to stay safe. Left with no real solution and a stranger with a knife still unaccounted for, she shared the footage online, hoping someone might recognize him, or at least to warn others living in the same building and the nearby area. As of now, no one on Reddit has publicly confirmed who this man is, and there are no updates in the thread about an arrest or any follow-up from police, which means Danielle and everyone else in that complex was left without real answers. Just a terrifying video of a stranger with a knife at her door. The following footage came from a doorbell camera watching over the front steps of a quiet apartment building late at night. But the exact location, the identity of the homeowner, and even who first uploaded it all remain a mystery. At the start of the clip, a lone woman pushed through the entrance and drifted into view at the front door, eventually reaching up to ring the bell, then pausing there, standing completely still, as if she were listening for any movement or the slightest sound on the other side. She appeared to be carrying a knife, and was wrapped in a light-colored sheet or blanket, loosely draped around her body and over part of her head, turning her into a messy, almost ghost-like figure against the dark hallway. Her overall appearance was extremely alarming. Her hair looked disheveled, her posture slightly hunched, as if she were either exhausted or not fully in control of herself. When she finally crouched down directly in front of the door, the long knife in her hand caught the light from the camera. But instead of simply ringing the bell or knocking this time, she began dragging the blade around the doormat, lifting and probing underneath it as if she were frantically searching for a hidden spare key or quietly testing how vulnerable the entrance really was. All the while, she rocked on her feet and swayed in place, her movements confused and unstable, giving the unsettling impression of someone not just lost, but dangerously unpredictable, hovering only inches from whoever might be on the other side. Although the footage cuts off just after she finishes checking that initial floor, you can see her start up the stairs and disappear from the frame, and it's not hard to imagine her moving on to the next level to repeat the same disturbing routine at the doors above. That possibility, taken together with everything we see her do in those few minutes, made her behavior throughout the clip feel less like a random visit and more like a deliberate attempt to gain access to someone's home. The way she fixated on the doormats, and the fact that she handled the knife so casually, even holding it in her mouth while at the door, suggested she may have been looking for a way to unlock the door and get inside, whether to steal or to confront whoever lived there. All of that, combined with how she moved and looked that night, the sheet wrapped around her body, the knife in her hand, and the way she drifted from door to door in such a suspicious manner, made her seem far less like a confused neighbor, and far more like someone deeply unstable, or heavily under the influence of something, with intentions that were impossible to feel safe about. On Reddit, people speculated about who she might be. Some guessed she was a meth head or in the middle of a full psychotic episode. Others suggested untreated mental illness or even a dementia patient who had wandered into the wrong building with a knife she didn't fully understand she was holding. But regardless of who this woman really was or what her true intentions might have been, this clip served as a chilling reminder to never blindly open your door and to always check your locks and confirm who's there before you even think about letting them in, because you never truly know who could be waiting on the other side. The following footage was recorded on a quiet street in South Los Angeles on a cold Tuesday night in November 2019. At around 11 p.m., the homeowner heard something outside her house and stepped onto her front porch to investigate, without realizing that within seconds her doorbell camera would capture one of the most chilling sounds one could hear in the middle of the night. Just seconds before that chilling cry echoed past her house, the woman had been upstairs in her bedroom, listening to music, when she heard a car creeping down the street and the faint sound of a woman crying for help. Caught off guard, the homeowner stepped out onto her front porch to see what was going on, never expecting that her doorbell camera was about to capture a possible kidnapping unfolding right in front of her home. As soon as that scream faded and the car disappeared down the street, the homeowner and several of her neighbors did the only thing they could think to do. They grabbed their phones and immediately called 911. Within minutes, officers were in the Lamert Park neighborhood, searching the area for any sign of the car, the woman, or a crime scene. But they unfortunately found nothing. No skid marks, no broken glass, no blood, and no one out on the street. With no physical evidence to work from, investigators had to rely on what people saw and heard in those few seconds. According to witnesses, the voice came from a young woman in the front passenger seat of a small white car, possibly a Toyota Prius or a Matrix, later believed to be a 2003 to 2008 Toyota Matrix, with its trunk hanging open as it sped away, while she screamed for help, and a man shouted over her. Police believe she was an African-American female, roughly 17 to 19 years old, with long braids, and that the driver may have been pulling her by the hair as the vehicle drove off. Based on that, LAPD treated the case as a possible kidnapping, and even reopened their investigation after the doorbell video spread online and in the news. But despite dozens of tips, they have never publicly confirmed who the screaming woman was or what ultimately happened to her. In the months that followed, detectives combed through missing persons reports, checked with other agencies, and chased down multiple leads. Yet to this day, it remains officially unclear whether this was a kidnapping, a violent domestic incident, or something else entirely, leaving that short, terrifying clip as one of the most disturbing pieces of footage ever caught on a home security camera. On a Tuesday night in mid-October 2025, just days before Halloween, a Ring doorbell camera captured 3 masked men gathering outside a home near Duke Street in Alexandria, Virginia. At first glance, it looked like yet another creepy Halloween moment caught on camera. However, what followed over the next few minutes would terrorize the homeowners to their core and leave the surrounding neighborhood gripped by fear for weeks.
Your worst nightmare! It's either you come out or we coming in! Your worst nightmare!
Inside the house, Shayla, her recently widowed mother, and her brother were getting ready for bed when that ring alert popped up on their phones. When they checked the live feed, they saw 3 individuals in full Halloween masks and costumes slowly approaching the front door. The group initially laughed, taunted, and made creepy remarks, even calling themselves her worst nightmare when Shayla asked who they were. At first, she figured it was just a Halloween prank, and even greeted them over the intercom with a casual Happy Halloween. But instead of laughing it off and walking away, the group leaned into the act and started making things worse, turning what looked like a prank into something much more menacing.
Open the door! I see you! Your worst nightmare!
Who is it?
Wanna get you! Open the door!
Who is it?
Open up the door! Hurry, make her wait inside! Open up the door!
Who is it?
Open up the door before we make her wait inside! Open up the door!
Despite her shouting at them through the intercom, and clearly wanting these masked men to leave, they stayed at the front door for nearly 10 minutes, repeatedly returning, ringing the bell and turning the handle, each time becoming even more aggressive. As the knocks grew harder and the comments turned darker, Shayla's mood shifted from amused to terrified, and she started firmly telling them to get off the property. The men even kept slipping away from the front and wandering into the back porch at times, clearly trying to find a different way to access the house. From there, the trio escalated things even further by openly threatening to damage the home and talking about grabbing a chair to break down the door, all while trying the doorknob and testing ways to force their way inside.
They banging this shit. Act like he's serious. Act like he's serious. Fine, then we will make our way in somewhere in this house. From the back or the front, it don't matter how it takes. Open the door! Open the door! Open the door! I'm gonna count to 10. If this door doesn't open, we're gonna come in. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll be back.
After the masked men moved out of view of the Ring camera, the situation was still unfolding just off frame, and that's when Shayla's brother jumped in and started shouting from inside the house. What unfolded next isn't entirely clear, but it's believed that he stepped up and yelled through the door at the intruders, making it clear that police had been called and warning them to leave the property. By that point though, they had already slipped into the fenced backyard and even damaged the back door and gate as they pushed and pulled on different entry points. Off camera, the three eventually ditched their costumes and made a run for it, fleeing the area before anyone inside could confront them directly. Before long, an armed relative Shayla had called earlier rushed over and arrived at the house, ready to confront whoever was lurking outside. But by then, the masked intruders were already gone.
You okay? Hold on, it's me walking around. I'm walking around. Don't shoot, I'm walking around. I need this house. That's my daughter-in-law. It was 3. I couldn't tell. They was in masks and they had jumpsuits on. I don't know. My son just came. But I'm listening. I don't know. Where they at? I'm not even paying people. I can see who it was. They're going to the backside. I ain't. My daughter is about to leave. Monty, put that away.
Even though the armed relative never actually came face to face with the masked men, the chaos they left behind was enough to keep Shayla and her family shaken for weeks and put the whole neighborhood on edge. The family immediately called police, and when officers arrived, they documented the damage to the doors and fencing and took statements about the threats the trio had made that night. In the days that followed, the Ring footage from Shayla's front door spread rapidly online, going viral across social media and news sites, and leaving people all over Alexandria anxious about who these masked intruders were and where they might strike next. With the community on edge and tips pouring in, investigators later held a press conference, stressing that what happened here was not treated as a harmless prank, calling it a serious incident that could have ended very differently, and warning the suspects directly that police were actively looking for them and would track them down.
I'm not aware of incidents that have occurred this heinous before, and that's why it's so concerning. But we're going to take every step once we identify them to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. And we take these incidents seriously.
After that public warning from the police, it seemed inevitable that the people behind the masks would soon be tracked down and arrested. Sure enough, about 2 weeks later, in a twist of events, detectives announced that the masked intruders were actually teenage relatives of Shayla's family, between 14 and 16 years old, and that this was all part of a so-called prank. Police later said that the teens weren't acting alone, and an adult cousin of Shayla's mother had helped plan and stage the whole thing. After consulting with investigators and the Commonwealth's attorney, Shayla and her family chose not to pursue criminal charges, and police confirmed the teens and adults involved would not be publicly identified. In the end, even though this turned out to be a prank, it was still a reckless and incredibly unsafe one. If the masked men, or now the teenagers, hadn't left when they did, they would almost certainly have come face to face with the armed relative Shayla had called for help, and that split-second encounter could easily have turned this story into something with a much darker ending. The following Ring camera footage was recorded outside a family home in Salinas, California, in the early hours of January 4, 2019. On that night, the Dungan family, who were the homeowners, were out of town while their children slept alone in the house. At around 2 a.m., their motion-activated doorbell camera captured 33-year-old Roberto Daniel Arroyo walking up to the front door and staring straight into the lens, already giving off a deeply unsettling, almost lifeless demeanor. This was the raw footage that the family discovered the next morning when they checked their camera alerts. From the very beginning, his behavior was bizarre and genuinely shocking, slow, fixated, and completely disconnected from any normal intention to knock, speak, or walk away. What followed next was one of the strangest things ever caught on a home security system. For close to the next 3+ hours, Arroyo kept returning to the doorstep, pressing his face up to the intercom, and obsessively licking the doorbell again and again. He drifted in and out of frame, wandered around the front yard, and even appeared to relieve himself on the property, all while the children remained unaware, sleeping just a few feet away behind the door. This strange act of licking the doorbell did not stop. It went on for nearly 3 hours. Over the course of the early morning, he kept returning to the front door as if he had nowhere else to be. When the Dungan family finally saw the footage, they immediately called the police, who were able to quickly identify and track down Arroyo. Officers later said that although he never tried to break in or harm anyone, the ring footage and other cameras in the area showed him lingering in the yard, tampering with an extension cord, and even appearing to relieve himself on the property. Based on that video alone and his prior record, investigators treated the case as a bizarre but criminal act of prowling rather than a simple prank. Arroyo ultimately faced misdemeanor charges, including prowling, petty theft for moving the extension cord, and violating his probation from an earlier case. Strangely, authorities never released any details about what substances were in his system, nor any formal mental health diagnosis. Even so, throughout the footage, Arroyo appeared extremely dazed and confused, moving slowly and aimlessly, as if under the influence of something very strong, and completely disconnected from reality. In the end, the Dungan family described the whole thing as both shocking and deeply weird, but said they were ultimately relieved that no one was hurt, and once they knew their kids were safe, they even tried to cope with it using a bit of dark humor rather than letting the footage haunt them.